time for change. Change to everything and absolutely anything. But with that being said, the most obvious question would be is, how's this all to begin? And yeah, with it starting as such, it's obviously being answered as such. So of course this is all to be a free exploration into a matter or issue concerning that of life. And that a few notes have also been made to briefly explore this expansive issue concerning that of life. And yet this is also to be a continued feature, which of course is also freely exploring the kingdom of heaven, as with creatively producing the kingdom of heaven within this physical state, whereby then directing this towards the following biblical scripture of John 14 verse 1 to 4, which comes to state, "Do not be worried and upset," Jesus told them. "Believe in God and also believe in me. There are many rooms in my Father's house, and I'm going to prepare a place for you. I would not tell you this if it were not so. And after I go there and prepare a place for you, I will come back and take you to myself, so that you will be where I am. You know the way that leads to the place where I'm going." Now, if we were to freely explore this biblical scripture, it's of course then to reflect upon the first sentence, which comes to state, "Do not be worried and upset." Now, within regards to the 7 deadly sins, of course, it's easily to equally realize and recognize that the state and notion of worry is of course easily able to be associated and connected to the state and notion of despair. Thus then clearly indicating that it is through the 7 deadly sins that the state and notion of worry within this physical state is then to be associated as with connected to that of the heart chakra. And then directing this towards the state and notion of being upset within this physical state. Of course, it's easily to equally realize and recognize that the state and notion of being upset within this physical state is easily able to be associated and connected to the state and notion of wrath. Thus then clearly indicating that it is through the 7 deadly sins that the state and notion of upsetness within this physical state is then to be associated as with connected to that of the throat chakra. And yet it's within this one singular sentence there is a clear indication that we should come to free ourselves, thus release ourselves from these 2 deadly sins, and that it is through freeing ourselves or releasing ourselves from these 2 deadly sins that it would then be coming to associate or connect the heart chakra with the state and notion of diligence as with passion, and that it will be coming to associate the throat chakra with the state and notion of forgiveness. And yet, if Jesus is also easily able to be described as the state and notion of truth, and that God is also easily able to be described as the state and notion of life, it's then to re-explore this biblical scripture within that context, which comes to state the following. Do not be worried and upset. Of course, we have come to exist with the state and notion of passion, and we have come to exist with the state and notion of forgiveness. Truth told them, believe in life and also believe in truth. There are many rooms in life's house, and truth is going to prepare a place for you. Truth would not tell you this if it were not so. And after truth goes there and prepares a place for you, truth will come back and take you to truth, so that you may be where truth is. You know the way that leads to the place where truth is going. Now, if truth has come to exist, if the existing state of truth has come to exist within the state of diligence as within the state of passion, and that it has also come to exist within the state of forgiveness, it is then clearly indicating that the state of truth has then also come to exist within the 7 virtues of life. Thus then clearly indicating that the state of truth has come to exist within the state of humility, kindness, forgiveness, diligence or passion, charity, temperance or patience, and chastity. And yet, if the existing state of truth has come to exist within the 7 virtues of life, it's then obviously to equally realize and recognize that the existing notion of truth has then also come to exist through the 7 notions of life, which of course are to be associated or connected to not only the 7 chakras, but are to be associated or connected to that of the 7 virtues of life as well. Thus, the notion of truth has come to exist within the notion of learning and teaching. The notion of truth has come to exist within the notion of support and creativity. The notion of truth has come to exist within the notion of healing. It has come to exist within the notion of encouragement. It has come to exist within the notion of assistance. It has come to exist within the notion of coordination. It has come to exist within the notion of survival. And yet, as we are to physically exist within the present state, as the one singular state of the emotional, truthful, natural state of self, is then coming to associate us with the one singular state of the emotional awareness, of which of course is to be associated or connected to that of the one singular state of the emotional spirit. Of course, the one singular state of the emotional awareness is that of the one singular state of the emotional spirit. Thus, as it is to physically exist within this physical state, within this state, it is then to emotionally exist as the true natural state of the emotional self. And yet, if the existing state of truth has come to exist within the existing states of the 7 virtues of life, right? Of course, we have come to exist within the physical present state of the now, without moving. Yet, even as it is to exist within the physical present state of the now, individuals are to constantly come our way. Life is to constantly be circulated around us as if it is able to be described as knowledge, right? So, of course, it's coming to, but of course, individuals have come to exist within an emotional, meaningful state of truth, right? So, it's coming to exist with all these individuals, right? Thus, it's attracting individuals, right? And in attracting individuals, it would also not only be attracting this vibrational energy that is to be associated with individuals, but it is also to be attracting the knowledge that is to be associated as with connected with the existing state of individuals. And that it is through existing with the 7 virtues of life within the physical present state of now, right, that we are then to, how could you say, emotionally exist within an emotional, meaningful state of an emotional truth within this physical state of the present state of the now, regardless of who comes our way. It is through the 7 virtues of life, and it is through truth existing within the 7 virtues of life that we are to react through the 7 virtues of life, thus creating a present state of an emotional, meaningful state of emotional truth within the present state, thus creatively producing a present state of an emotional, meaningful state of emotional truth as an emotional, meaningful state of emotional paradise, thus the heavenly state within the present state. And yet, if the notion of truth, right, is also to exist, right, through the 7 notions of life, which of course are to be associated with the 7 virtues of life, is then coming to acknowledge that the notion of truth has come to exist through the notion of learning, through the notion of teaching, through the notion of support and creativity, through the notion of healing, through the notion of encouragement, through the notion of assisting, through the notion of coordination, through the notion of survival. Thus, it's through these notions that we are then to creatively produce an emotional, meaningful state of emotional truth within this physical state. Thus, of course, life is to move forward. We are to move forward. I am existing within the present state of the now, but I am able to walk out my door. I'm able to walk down the road. I'm able to go down. And it is through these 7 notions of life that I am then able to creatively produce an emotional, meaningful state of emotional truth within this physical present state of the now, which is clearly being stated. Right? If we are to re-explore this, right? I will come back, okay? Let's re-explore this, okay? there are many rooms in my Father's house, right? There are many rooms in my Father's house. Now, if this were to be directed towards children, a child, take 3 children, right? It's of course easily to acknowledge that each child within a state of play, that if they were to be separated, right, that each child given an amount of toys are to creatively produce an imaginative state, that they are to come into a state of play, and that this, in an imaginative state, anything is possible, and that the heavenly state is also easily being described, that where anything is possible. Thus, it's the imaginative state that is the heavenly state. But, of course, they have come to creatively produce their own imaginative states within the physical state to explore and experience in the state of play, right? But, if the 3 children were to come together and to be given the toys, of course, they are then to creatively produce an emotional imaginative state, which they are then to share within a state of unity, right? Whereby, again, I'm going to prepare a place. It says here, there are many rooms in my Father's house, thus then clearly indicating, right, that each individual is to exist with their own imaginative state, right? But if the emotional meaningful state of emotional truth is to physically exist as an emotional meaningful state of emotional paradise within this physical state, we cannot limit the state of paradise to one specific place. For instance, seeing the trance sky, seeing a beautiful sunrise. I cannot limit that exploration and experience as one specific state of paradise on this earth, whereby me exploring Portugal, I came to explore and experience the Algarve, which I can again explore, I come to describe as a state of paradise within this physical state. But yet the trance sky, as with the Algarve, is again being collectively shared, whereby this, how could you say, this emotional meaningful state of truthful paradise within this physical state is then to be shared within a state of unity, right? But then it's also coming to state, as I came to state, that and after I go there and prepare a place for you, I will come back and take you to myself, so that you will be where I am. Again, the emotional meaningful state of emotional truth is to exist within the present state. It's to exist where the truth is. You know the way that leads to the place where I'm going. Again, it is through not only the 7 virtues of life, but it is through the 7 notions of life that we are then to creatively produce an emotional meaningful state of emotional truth within this physical state, right? Then, directing this towards the following biblical scripture of Revelations 2 verse 7, which comes to state, he who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. To him who overcomes, I will grant to consume of the tree of life, which is in the paradise of God, right? Which is in the paradise of God. Now, nature, an existing state of nature, within its natural state of emotional self, its truthful state of emotional self, is able to be described as a state of paradise of God, the heavenly state of God within this physical state. And yet, the paradise of God is also easily able to be directed towards the existing state of a home, whereby a home, of course, has come to exist within an emotional, meaningful state of emotional truth. This is what makes a home. It is an individual existing within a state of truth that has come to creatively produce peace, and it is existing within a state of truthful love that they have come to, how could you say, embrace this place as their kingdom, right? And it is existing within a state of truth that they have, of course, come to be able to free themselves within their own within their own kingdom. But it is also acknowledging that, I mean, there's truth, love, freedom, and then of course respect. I mean, where is the respect? The respect is between individuals that have come to share this kingdom of your place. But the mere fact is, again, we cannot limit even that. We cannot limit one home, if you want to call it that, to the paradise of God, whereby the paradise of God is able to be directed towards many homes where truth is able to exist. That is what is able to make a place, a home, truth. This is where the paradise of God is to physically exist within this physical state. It's within a state of truth. He who has, and I'm going to say this again, he who has an ear, right? Let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. Let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. Okay, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. The Spirit, the one singular state of the emotional awareness, the one singular state of the emotional spirit. Again, it is to hear what the Spirit says to the churches. It is to hear what the Spirit says to the 7 virtues of life. It is to hear what the Spirit says to the 7 virtues, 7 notions of life, to creatively produce an emotional, meaningful state of emotional truth within this physical state. Again, it is to hear the state of humility. It is to hear the state of kindness. It is to hear the state of forgiveness. It is to hear the state of diligence, passion. In this, I mean, to explore this, to hear the state of diligence or passion, to encourage yourself, to say that this can be done, regardless of the odds, that this can be done. Who cares? This can be done. The state of charity, temperance and patience, chastity. I mean, the mere fact is to hear what the Spirit says, to creatively produce an emotional, meaningful state of emotional truth within this physical. To him who overcomes. To him who overcomes. What are we overcoming? Like literally, what are we overcoming? Directing this towards the following biblical scripture of John 8 verse 12, which comes to state, Then Jesus spoke again unto them, saying, I am the light of the earth, that he who followeth me shall not walk in darkness. What are we overcoming? Darkness, darkness. A state of question. A state of question is easily able to be described as a state of darkness. A state of question is to be associated or connected to that of the egotistical perspective state of thought consciousness. Again, it is the egotistical perspective state of thought consciousness that has come to exist within a constant state of question. Thus, it has constantly come to exist within a state of darkness. To him who overcomes, obviously, to overcome the egotistical perspective state of thought consciousness, thus to overcome a state of question, to overcome a state of darkness, to overcome a state of deception, I will grant to consume of the tree of life, which is in the paradise of God. Again, I will grant to consume of the tree of life, which is in the paradise of God. Directing this towards the biblical scriptures. Genesis, it clearly comes to state, in the Garden of Eden, there was the tree of knowledge and there was the tree of life. Right? Clearly comes to state this. It was from the tree of knowledge that Eve and Adam came to eat of the fruit and were influenced with the distinguishing state. Thus, to him who overcomes, it is then directing it that it is to him who overcomes the distinguishing state. Thus, it is to him who overcomes the sinful state, right? I will grant to consume of the tree of life. Again, the tree of life is easily able to be directed towards the cannabis plant. Again, why the cannabis plant? In this day of age, if a person cannot realize and recognize the amount of ways that the cannabis plant is able to be physically beneficial to this physical state of emotional existence, to not only other existing plants, but to insects, birds, individuals,
to the earth in general. I mean, to him who I will grant to consume the tree of life. Again, we are to consume the tree of life. But then directing this towards, where's my note? Where's my note? Then directing this towards the same biblical scripture. The exact same biblical scripture. The exact same biblical scripture. Right? In a different Bible, which comes to say, Revelations 2, verse 7. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. To him who overcomes, to him I will give some of the hidden manna. I will give him a white stone, a new name written on that stone, on which no one knows but he who receives it. I'm going to say that again. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. To him who overcomes, to him I will give some of the hidden manna, and I will give him a white stone, a new name written on that stone, on which no one knows but he who receives it. Now, manna. In mentioning manna, what is manna? What is manna? Manna, Deuteronomy 8, verse 16. In the wilderness he fed you manna, which your fathers did not know. That he might humble you, and that he might test you to do good for you in the end. Right? I'm going to say that again. In the wilderness he fed you manna, which your fathers did not know, that he might humble you, and that he might test you to do good for you in the end. Okay, so it's to equally realize and recognize that, of course, manna is that of mushroom, and that the tree of life is, of course, that of the cannabis plant, and that it is through consuming manna, right? In this one biblical scripture, it clearly comes to state, to him I will give some of the hidden manna. To him I will give some of the hidden mushroom. I will give him a white stone, a new name written on that stone, on which no one knows but he who receives it. To consume the manna is then obviously to humble yourself, right? To humble yourself is to enter into a state of meditation. I mean, obviously we are to then explore the emotional imaginative state, and that it is through this emotional imaginative state and a new name, I will give him a white stone. Of course, it's through this one singular state of the emotional imagination that we are then to, how could you say, receive a spiritual name. In place of this descriptive name that we have been given within this physical state, whereby, I mean, if my name has currently come to exist as that of Gregory, my name is, of course, has also then come to exist as that of Greg. Yet, I am also able to change my name into Paul, Peter, Simon, Matthew, David, Samuel. I'm able to become all these individuals. I'm able to become all these individuals through that of the egotistical perspective state of thought consciousness. Yet I am only to exist as one singular individual, as the true natural state of the emotional self, with that of the spiritual name. This is the emotional name that has been given unto us through the emotional state of clarity, right? But then to continue this exploration, right? To continue this exploration, it's then to direct this towards the lost gospel of Thomas, right? Give me 2 minutes here to find it quickly. The last gospel of Thomas comes to state, Jesus said, congratulations to the one who came into being before coming into being. If you become my disciples and pay attention to my sayings, these stones will serve you, for there are 5 trees in paradise for you. They do not change, summer or winter. Their leaves do not fall. Whoever knows them will not taste death. Will not taste death, okay? Am I right here? Yeah, I am right here. I am going in the right direction here, okay? Jesus said, congratulations to the one who came into being before coming into being. the one singular state of the emotional awareness as the one singular state of the emotional spirit came into being before you physically came into being. If you become my disciples and pay attention to my sayings, these stones will serve you. If I had to grab 3 stones, they are materials. Yet, material, a state of knowledge clustered together. This is what a rock is. Clustered form, just knowledge, right? But in this, of course, a slave to the wage. Am I able to become a slave to rocks? A slave to the wage? Money. If we had to take 3 coins and say, okay, compare it to 3 rocks, what is the damn difference? They are what the one has got a financial currency and the one has got like absolutely no currency until it is that of gold or some other gemstone. But in that, let's say now that, what are they? It's material. A slave to the wage. Again, they will serve you. Money will serve you. Materials will serve you. You are not to serve money, right? For there are 5 trees in paradise for you. They do not change summer or winter, for their leaves do not fall. Whoever knows them will not taste death. Whoever knows them will not taste death. Okay. In this 5 trees, in this, of course, the tree of life is easily able to be directed towards that of cannabis. Now, cannabis has been used for centuries for spiritual reasons, right? For cannabis to induce a state of meditation. Now, an induced state of meditation is obviously an induced state of prayer, and an induced state of meditation is also to induce the state of the one singular state of the emotional clarity. That's the one singular state of the emotional imagination. Now, okay, and there are 5 trees. Okay, there are 5 trees in paradise. Okay, so of course cannabis is obviously one, obviously, right? But natural hallucinogenics, the natural state of hallucinogenics. Okay, cannabis 1. Then it's obviously morning glory. Morning glory is easily able to be associated with that of LSD, thus LSA. LSD is the synthetic form, but the natural chemical within morning glory, the hallucinogenic, the visionary experience chemical within morning glory is that of LSA. Salvia divinorum, thus divine sage, right? Ayahuasca, right? Also been known to be connected or associated with that of the spirit molecule, thus, and then it's also then directing this towards that of ibogaine. And yet, these are 5 plants, right? Cannabis, ayahuasca, ibogaine, salvia divinorum, and morning glory, that are all able to induce a state of meditation, and induce a state of meditation, to induce the emotional imaginative state to be explored and experienced. Thus, to explore and experience the one singular state of the emotional clarity, and that it is through exploring the one singular state of the emotional clarity that it is then to sensationally acknowledge a one singular state of emotional truth, to then emotionally know how to creatively produce an emotional meaningful state of emotional truth within this physical state, as an emotional meaningful state of emotional paradise within this physical state. And yet, with mushrooms, manna being mentioned, of course, it's mushrooms, but mushrooms are fungi, right? But with mushrooms being mentioned, as then also coming to mention the following biblical scripture, okay? But now, before mentioning this, okay, it's also obviously to acknowledge that cacti, especially that of San Pedro, is also able to be associated with that of the hallucinogenic experience, that of the visionary experience. And of course, this hallucinogenic experience, that of the visionary experience, is of course to exist within the physical state of the mind, right? As we are to exist within this physical present state with the 2 eyes, to explore and experience this physical present state with the 2 eyes, we are to explore the imaginative state with that of the 3rd eye, which again has been distinguished as the 3rd eye. But if we are to exist, spiritually exist, before it's to physically exist, it's the third eye, which is then the first eye. Then, to explore that of mushrooms, right? To explore that of mushrooms, manna, right? To explore more importantly that of manna. It's then directing this towards the following biblical scripture of Psalm 78, verse 24 to 25. He rained down manna upon them to eat. He gave them food from heaven. Man did eat the bread of angels. He sent them food in abundance, clearly indicating that man once did eat the bread of the angels. Man once did eat the magic mushroom to explore the imaginative state. Then directing this towards the following biblical scripture of John 6, verse 50 to 51, which comes to state, this is the bread of which comes down out of heaven. Now, of course, the heaven is to be the one singular state of the emotional imagination, the one singular state of the emotional clarity. I mean, this is beyond the physical state. To explore beyond the physical state is to explore the one singular state of the emotional imagination. Okay, this is the bread which comes down out of heaven, so that one may eat of it and not die. I am the living bread that came down out of heaven. If anyone eats of this bread, he will live forever. And the bread also which I will give for the life of the world is my flesh. I'm going to say that again. This is the bread which comes down out of heaven, so that the one may eat of it and not die. I'm the living bread that came down out of heaven. If anyone eats of this bread, he will live forever. And the bread also which I will give for the life of the world is my flesh. The life, I mean, if we have to think of bread, the physical state of bread, it's existing without life. Thus, then clearly indicating that this bread has come to physically exist in existence with life. Thus, then clearly indicating that this bread is to be that of the mushroom. And then it comes to state, so that the one may eat of it and not die. Now, if it is to, how could you say, to explore and experience the one singular state of the emotional imagination, that's the one singular state of the emotional clarity, again we have come to explore beyond this physical state. Now, to explore the beyond this physical state is of course releasing ourselves from beyond this physical state. Thus, we are able to exist forever within the one singular state of the emotional imagination, thus the one singular state of the emotional clarity, thus again the heavenly state, beyond this physical state. If anyone eats of this bread, he will live forever, clearly indicating, okay, and then directing this towards the following biblical scripture of, I hope I can say this name correctly, Nehemiah 9 verse 15. You provided bread from heaven for them to eat. You brought forth water from a rock for them to drink. And you told them to enter in order to possess the land which you swore to give them. I'm going to say that again. You provided the bread from heaven for them to eat. You brought forth water from a rock for them to drink. Again, just to briefly explore this. You provided bread from heaven for them to eat. Again, I mean, if we had to think about it back in the day, I mean, the mere fact is, where is this mushroom appearing from? Where is this mushroom appearing from? The one day is there, the next day it's gone. Where is it appearing from? It's obviously that these individuals were thinking that this bread was being produced from the state of heaven, right? You brought forth water from a rock for them to drink. The mere fact is that it has been proven, scientifically proven, that water can be sprouted from a rock. I mean, people have been doing this for centuries, getting how could you say, a drink from a rock, if you want to call it that. And you told them to enter into, in order to possess the land which you swore to them. And you told them to enter in order to possess the land which you swore to give to them. and you told them to enter. Again, we are clearly being guided that it is to explore the one singular state of the emotional imagination, thus the one singular state of the emotional clarity, to possess the land which you swore to them, to, again, sensationally acknowledge a one singular state of emotional truth, to then emotionally know how to creatively produce an emotional meaningful state of emotional truth within this physical state. Thus, again, this one singular state, or this emotional meaningful state of emotional truth, is again the heavenly state within this physical state. Again, it is through the mushroom. Through the mushroom. I'm just going to point this out quickly. If we had to look at the cross, this has been a symbol for truth, right? Jesus obviously being sacrificed on the cross, right? But if you had to look at the cross, grab hold of any cross there, and you will clearly see that if you had to join from that point to that point, and from that point to that point, it is making the state of a mushroom, right? Clearly being directed that it is through the state of a mushroom that we are then able to explore the one singular state of the emotional imagination. Again, if an individual had to be consumed by so much pollution, let's call it, right? Pollution, and now they want to come and explore and experience the emotional state of the emotional imagination. That's the one singular state of the emotional clarity through the meditative state, right? Of course, individuals being polluted with so much whatever in their minds, right? In coming into a state of meditation, they are only to explore and experience a deep state of darkness. But again, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. Thus, directing this towards the following biblical scripture, just briefly. From Matthew 6, verse 22. The light of the body is the eye. If therefore thine eye be single, the whole body shall be full of light. Thus, it is, how could you say, to explore the one singular state of the emotional imagination beyond the state of darkness. Again, it is with the 5 trees and with the mushroom and with the cacti that are to, how could you say, induce an state of meditation upon the individual. Now, to then direct this towards the following biblical scripture, right? From the last Gospel of Thomas, right? From the last Gospel of Thomas, right? Jesus said to his disciples, compare to me to something and tell me what I am like. I'm going to say that again. Jesus said to his disciples, compare me to something and tell me what I am like. Simon and Peter said to him, you are like an angel. Matthew said to him, you are like a wise philosopher. Thomas said to him, Teacher, my mouth is utterly unable to say what you are like. Jesus said, I am not your teacher because you have drunk. You have become intoxicated from the bubbly spring that I have tended. I am going to say that again. Jesus said to his disciples, compare me to something and tell me what I am like. Simon and Peter said to him, you are like an angel. Again, Jesus clearly describing that Jesus is an emotional deity. An emotional deity that we are able to explore and experience or encounter within the one singular state of the emotional imagination. Again, this deity is even able to come into an existing state as your grandmother, your grandfather, whoever has passed away or whoever is to come into the future. This is an emotional deity. It's an emotional state of truth. The existing state of God coming into as something that we might be able to explain or that we might not be able to explain. The mere fact is, if even we have to think about this, right? The psychedelic experience, the dreamlike state experience, the visionary experience. But let's say direct this towards dreams. Right? Direct this towards dreams. Are individuals truthfully purely able to describe everything that came into occurrence in that dream?
like 100% to like the 100% detail. Like the mere fact is, even if we had to explore the emotional imagination, like if anything is possible, are we truly able to describe everything in perfect detail? The mere fact is, if we had to think about the hallucinogenic experience, are we able to truly describe everything that has come into detail? No, right? Then it comes to say, I'm going to say this again. Jesus said to his disciples, compare me to something and tell me what I am like. Simon and Peter said to him, you are like an angel. They can't describe this individual. They cannot describe this deity. Like, this individual has become so divine in their presence, it's like undescribable to their like minds, right? And then Matthew said to him, you are like a wise philosopher. A wise philosopher. Where is wisdom? Where is wisdom? It exists within the state of truth. This is what wisdom is. It's coming to sensatiously acknowledge one singular state of emotional truth within our state of being. And if it is to acknowledge it within our state of being, it is to acknowledge it within the one singular state of emotional clarity, right? And that it is then coming to release this one singular state of emotional truth as wisdom, insight. Insight. This is what insight is. Think about that word. Insight. Insight. I am to see the one singular state of the emotional truth within myself, right? Philosophy. I mean, philosophy is so impacted by so many theories about life, about existence, about the universe, about everything. Thomas said to him, teacher, my mouth is utterly unable to say what you are like. Again, this individual is clearly like beyond speech of word, description of how to describe Jesus as a deity within this physical state. Jesus said, I am not your teacher. I'm going to say that again. Jesus said, I am not your teacher, because you have drunk and you have become intoxicated from the bubbly spring that I have tended. I'm going to say that again. I am not your teacher, because you have drunk and you have become intoxicated from the bubbly spring that I have tended. This might seem a bit like way beyond like any biblical scripture that a person could possibly like come to grasp in the Bible in itself. But think of it this way. Jesus is clearly being described as a divine being within this description, right? And through being described as a divine being, he is coming into a state of health, a complete state of health. But if Jesus has also come to promote the mushroom, it's then also to acknowledge that Jesus also once upon a time ago came to consume the mushroom, thus then clearly indicating that he says, because you have drunk from and have become intoxicated from the bubbly spring that I have tended, that he has personally tended this juice, this sona juice or psychedelic juice, whatever you want to call it, that they can, I am not your teacher, thus it's the one singular state. It's them coming to acknowledge the one singular state of emotional truth within the one singular state of the emotional imagination that has then come to emotionally guide them to emotionally know how to creatively produce an emotional meaningful state of emotional truth within this physical state. Then, I mean, I've just gone everywhere here. Okay, also just to mention this, just to briefly mention this within regards to this before this ends. The mere fact is that we have to realize and recognize that there is some state of truth towards this. That the mere fact is that the Pope, for centuries and centuries and centuries, the Pope has worn a red robe with white underneath it, and symbolic to Jesus' crucifixion, whereby this red robe and white underneath it is then also able to be symbolic to that of Jesus' blood. Now the mere fact is this is all a bit like cannibalistic, the mere fact if you had to think about it. But when he comes to state this, I am not your teacher because you have drunk you have drunk. You have become intoxicated from the bubbly spring that I have tended. It's again clearly indicating that this is not Jesus' blood, but this is a psychedelic urine, if you want to call it that, especially when, I mean, if we have to think of the Pope and the way that he has come in, I mean, Jesus came to eat, consume the Amanita muscaria mushroom. So, with that being said, this has gone a bit everywhere, continued for a bit too much here. So, with that being said, may the lovers keep on loving and the haters keep on hating, and of course this will be continued. So, with that being within equal understanding, my episode. Namaste.